The house on the crest of the Pacific Palisades had been designed by Michael Harrison himself, a masterpiece of modern architecture, polished concrete, soaring glass walls, and warm cedar wood. It was built to capture the golden hour, filtering light across wide hardwood floors that had remained far too quiet for far too long. Michael stood at the kitchen island, his tall, broad-shouldered frame outlined against the dusk. He was a man of precise habits, a successful real estate developer whose calm demeanor was usually an anchor for everyone around him. But tonight, as he swirled the dark amber whiskey in his glass, his dark eyes were fixed on the hallway leading to the master bedroom. Dear viewers, please let us know where you are watching from and which region or country you are in. Please like this video, watch it until the end, and subscribe to our channel. Your support is very important to us. Thank you so much. Emily walked in slowly. She was an extraordinary woman, slender, elegant, with dark brown skin that caught the ambient warm lights of the kitchen, and hair wrapped in a silk scarf. For 7 years, they had built a life together that looked immaculate from the outside. But inside, beneath the curated art and architectural awards, was a quiet, persistent grief. "How are you feeling?" Michael asked quietly, setting his glass down on the quartz counter. Emily took a slow breath, folding her arms across her chest as if holding herself together against a cold wind. "The doctor called half an hour ago," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The 5th transfer didn't take, Michael. It's over." Michael closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, feeling the heavy, familiar blow land directly in his chest. He crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. Emily didn't cry at first. She simply leaned into the solid warmth of her husband, her face pressed against his collarbone. "We've tried everything," she whispered, her voice fracturing. "My body just won't keep them. I feel like I'm failing us." "Don't ever say that," Michael said firmly, leaning back so he could look into her eyes. He cupped her cheek with his hand, his thumb gently wiping away a stray tear. "You are not failing anyone. We are in this together. If the road we're walking ends here, we find another road." "What road is left?" she asked softly. Michael hesitated, looking at her with deep affection and steady resolve. "Surrogacy," he said. "We have 2 viable embryos left in storage. We find someone who can carry our child for us. We don't give up on our family, Em. We just accept help." Emily looked at him, the heavy shadow of heartbreak battling with a tiny, flickering spark of hope in her eyes. 3 months later, the morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aegis Surrogacy, an exclusive agency in downtown Los Angeles. Michael held Emily's hand under the glass conference table. They had reviewed dozens of profiles over the preceding weeks, but none had felt right until they read the file of Sophie Vance. Sophie was 24, a young Black woman with a soft smile, high cheekbones, and an aura of quiet reserve. Her file listed her as an independent catering worker who had completed 2 years of community college. Her medical records were spotless, and her psychological evaluation was cleared with glowing notes regarding her gentle disposition and empathy. The heavy mahogany door opened, and the agency coordinator walked in, followed by Sophie. "Michael, Emily, this is Sophie Vance," the coordinator announced with a warm smile. Sophie stepped forward, her eyes modest yet clear. She wore a simple cream-colored knit sweater and dark trousers. Her hair was neatly styled in soft braids gathered at her shoulders. "It's such an honor to meet you both," Sophie said, her voice soft and melodious. She reached out to shake Emily's hand first, then Michael's. When her hand touched Michael's, her grip was firm, her dark eyes lingering on his face for just a fraction of a second longer than expected, before she turned back to Emily. "Please sit down," Emily said, gesturing to the armchair across from them. "Thank you for meeting us today, Sophie." "Thank you for having me," Sophie replied, settling gracefully into the chair. "I read your profile. I know how long you've been trying and how much love you have waiting for a baby. I just, I felt drawn to your story. I want to give someone the joy that life hasn't always handed out easily." Michael leaned forward, impressed by her poise. "Surrogacy is a massive commitment, Sophie," Michael noted, his tone respectful but observant. "It's emotionally and physically demanding. What made you decide to take this path?" Sophie looked down at her neatly folded hands for a brief moment before meeting his gaze again. "I grew up in a big family back in Ohio," she said smoothly, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "Family is everything to me. I don't have children of my own yet, but I know what it means to carry hope. Helping a loving couple build their legacy. There's no higher purpose than that for me right now." Emily looked at Michael, her eyes glowing with an emotion she hadn't felt in years. She reached across the table and touched Sophie's hand. "Thank you, Sophie. You have no idea what those words mean to us." The embryo transfer took place 6 weeks later at a top-tier private clinic in Beverly Hills. The procedure went perfectly. 2 weeks after that, Michael's phone rang while he was at a construction site in Santa Monica. "Michael!" Emily's voice squeaked over the speaker, brimming with tears. "Em, what is it? What did the clinic say?" "She's pregnant, Michael. The HCG levels are high. It worked." Michael closed his eyes, leaning back against the frame of an unfinished luxury high-rise, feeling the ocean breeze on his face. A lump formed in his throat. "We're going to be parents," he whispered. "We're going to be parents," she echoed. In the weeks that followed, Michael and Emily spared no expense to ensure Sophie's comfort. They covered her living expenses, provided her with an organic meal delivery service, paid for top medical specialists, and checked on her regularly. Every appointment was a shared victory. At the 12-week ultrasound, they sat together in the dim lighting of the examination room. The rhythmic, thunderous sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the space, fast, strong, and alive. "That's your baby girl," the technician said, pointing to the grainy gray screen. Emily burst into tears, covering her mouth with her hand. Michael wrapped his arm around Emily's shoulders, kissing her forehead softly. From the examination table, Sophie lay back, looking at the screen, then shifting her gaze to Michael. She observed the way his strong hand gently caressed his wife's shoulder, the tenderness in his eyes, the absolute devotion in his posture. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Sophie said softly, her eyes fixed entirely on Michael. "She's a miracle," Michael replied, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes never leaving the monitor. Sophie smiled, a quiet secret smile that went unnoticed by the couple focused on the fluttering heartbeat on the screen. By the 4th month of the pregnancy, Sophie began complaining of severe morning sickness and dizziness. She mentioned to Emily during a phone call that her small downtown apartment was noisy, hot, and lacked proper security, making her anxious and unable to sleep well. Emily was immediately filled with concern. "Michael," Emily said that night over dinner in their modern dining room, "I've been thinking. Our guest house is completely empty. It has its own kitchen, a private garden, and full air conditioning. Why don't we ask Sophie to stay there for the remainder of the pregnancy?" Michael paused, his fork halfway to his plate. He frowned slightly, pondering the idea. "Em, I know you want her to be comfortable, but having your surrogate live on your property changes the dynamic. Boundaries might get blurred." "She's carrying our daughter, Michael," Emily reasoned softly, reaching across the table to hold his hand. "She's isolated in that tiny apartment. Here, she'll have peace, security, and we can make sure she has everything she needs. It gives me peace of mind. Please?" Michael looked at his wife's hopeful face and softened. "All right," he conceded. "If it gives you peace of mind, let's offer it to her." When they proposed the idea to Sophie the following afternoon, her eyes lit up with an intensity that surprised Michael. "Live here?" Sophie asked, looking around the sprawling estate with its infinity pool and manicured lawns. "With you?" "In the detached guest house," Michael clarified gently but firmly. "It offers complete privacy, but you'll be close enough that Emily can help you whenever you need anything." "It's dreamlike," Sophie whispered, her gaze drifting back to Michael. "I would love that. Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much." 2 days later, Sophie moved in. At first, the arrangement seemed seamless. Sophie was polite, kept the guest house immaculate, and spent her afternoons reading in the garden. But as the 5th month began and her bump became noticeably rounder, small, unsettling shifts began to occur. Michael returned home early one Tuesday afternoon from a client meeting. The house was quiet. Emily was at her art gallery downtown. He poured himself a glass of iced water and walked into his private study to review blueprint revisions. As he opened the door, he stopped dead in his tracks. Sophie was standing behind his executive desk. She was holding one of his linen shirts that he had left on the back of his chair earlier that morning. She had the fabric lifted close to her face, her eyes closed, inhaling deeply. "Sophie?" Michael said, his voice sharp and startled. Sophie gasped, dropping the shirt onto the desk as if it had burned her. Her face flushed, but she quickly smoothed her expression into one of innocent surprise. "Oh, Michael, you scared me," she said, holding a hand over her heart, her breath coming fast. "What are you doing in my office?" Michael asked, stepping into the room, his eyes narrowed. I was looking for a book," she lied smoothly, her voice dropping to a breathless register. "Emily mentioned you had a copy of architectural essays. I came in to look for it, and then I saw your shirt was crooked on the chair. I was just folding it for you." Michael stared at her. The explanation was weak, and the look in her eyes was far too intense for a casual houseguest. "Sophie, if you need a book, just ask Emily or me," Michael said, keeping his tone measured, cool, and distant. "Please don't come into my private office without asking first." "Of course," Sophie said softly. She stepped closer to him as she headed toward the door, passing so close that her arm brushed against his chest. She paused, looking up at him through her lashes. "I'm sorry, Michael. I only wanted to feel close to the family. I didn't mean to upset you." "It's fine," Michael said, backing up a step to reestablish physical space. "Just keep to the main living areas or the guest house." Sophie looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face with a bizarre, unsettling tenderness, before she turned and walked out. Over the next 3 weeks, Sophie's presence began to feel increasingly suffocating to Michael, though Emily remained oblivious, attributing Sophie's frequent appearances to pregnancy-induced loneliness. Whenever Michael was home alone, working in the garage, swimming laps in the pool late at night, or reading on the terrace, Sophie would inevitably appear. One Friday night, Emily was hosted at a dinner banquet for local gallery directors. Michael stayed home, catching up on paperwork in the living room. The glass doors were open to the summer night, the crickets chirping softly outside. A faint sound of footsteps made him look up. Sophie was standing in the doorway leading from the patio. She was wearing a thin silk nightgown that clung to her pregnant silhouette. Her long hair fell loosely over her shoulders. "Michael?" she whispered, her voice honeyed and low. Michael immediately set his laptop aside and stood up, his jaw tightening. "Sophie, it's 11 o'clock at night. Is something wrong with the baby?" "No," she said softly, taking a slow step into the room. "The baby is fine. She's kicking. She's very active tonight." "That's good," Michael said, keeping his voice professional. You should be resting. Do you need me to call Emily? Why would you call Emily? Sophie asked, her voice dropping an octave. She took another step closer, standing barely 2 feet away from him now. Emily isn't here. It's just us. Michael's instinct screamed at him. He felt an icy spike of tension climb up his spine. Sophie, go back to the guest house, he said, his tone turning hard as steel. Now, why are you always so distant with me, Michael? She asked, looking at him with an expression of intense, desperate longing. I'm carrying your child. Her heart beats inside me. We are connected in a way no one else can understand. Don't you feel it? I feel that you are our surrogate, Michael said, his eyes hard. Nothing more. You are carrying our child because we hired you to do a job. I love my wife. I suggest you go back to your room and remember where the boundaries lie. Sophie's eyes flickered with a sudden, unsettling flash of pain and anger, but she quickly suppressed it, biting her lip. You don't have to pretend when she's not here, Sophie whispered softly, taking a step back toward the patio doors. I know how you look at me, Michael. I see it. Before Michael could respond to the sheer absurdity of her claim, she slipped into the darkness of the garden. 2 days later, heavy dark clouds rolled over Los Angeles, bringing a rare torrential rainstorm. Emily had left early that morning for an emergency legal deposition in San Diego and wasn't expected back until late that night. Michael was in his glass-walled study on the second floor, working on project proposals while thunder rumbled across the valley. Around 8 in the evening, the study door creaked open. Sophie stepped inside. She was drenched in rain, her hair clinging to her cheeks, her clothes dripping onto the hardwood floor. She was holding her stomach with both hands, gasping for air as if in distress. Michael immediately bolted upright from his desk. Sophie, what happened? Are you in pain? He demanded, crossing the room toward her. Michael, please, help me, she sobbed, staggering forward. Michael instinctively reached out to steady her, gripping her by the arms to keep her from falling. Are you having contractions? I'm calling an ambulance right now, he said, reaching into his pocket for his phone. The moment his hands were on her shoulders, Sophie's panic transformed into something terrifyingly calculated. She threw her arms around his neck, pulling herself tightly against his chest. Before Michael could pull back, she leaned up and tried to press her lips forcefully against his. Michael recoiled instantly, turning his head violently so her lips only caught his cheek. He grabbed her wrists and forcefully pushed her back, breaking her grip on him. What the hell are you doing? Michael roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Sophie fell back against the bookcase, her breathing ragged, her eyes wide and glittering with an unhinged passion. I love you, she cried out, her voice cracking with wild emotion. I know you feel it too. You look at me every single day. She can't give you what I'm giving you. I'm giving you a daughter, Michael. We are meant to be a family. Michael stood his ground, his tall frame rigid, his fists clenched at his sides. His face was a mask of cold, unyielding rage. You are out of your mind, Michael said, his voice deadly quiet and precise. Listen to me very carefully, Sophie. I do not love you. I have never looked at you with anything other than common courtesy. I love my wife, Emily. She is the only woman I have ever loved, and the only woman I will ever love. This child belongs to Emily and me. You are a vessel, nothing more. Sophie stared at him, her chest heaving. The words hit her like physical blows, but instead of breaking her delusion, something snapped dangerously behind her eyes. Her expression flattened into an eerie, unnatural calm. You're just saying that because you're afraid, she whispered, wiping a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. You're afraid of hurting her, but you'll see. Soon, you'll see that she's the one standing in our way." Without another word, Sophie turned and walked out into the dark hallway, leaving a trail of rainwater behind her. In the quiet darkness of the guest house, Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, her wet clothes clinging to her shivering frame. Rain slammed violently against the window pane. She stared into the full-length mirror across the room. She ran her hands gently over her round belly, feeling the kick of the baby inside. "He loves us," she whispered into the empty room, her voice soft, sweet, and terrifyingly calm. "He's just trapped. She has him trapped in that marriage with her money and her history. He had to say those harsh things. He had to protect himself." She closed her eyes, remembering the feel of Michael's broad shoulders under her hands, the warmth of his chest. In her mind, his firm rejection was rewritten as tragic resistance, a brave man denying his true feelings out of duty to a pathetic, barren wife. "Don't worry, little girl," Sophie cooed, patting her stomach softly. "Mommy is going to fix this. Mommy is going to clear the path so your daddy can finally be with us." She looked up at her reflection in the glass. The innocent, quiet young woman who had walked into Aegis surrogacy months ago was gone. In her eyes burned the brilliant, dangerous light of absolute obsession. Emily was the obstacle. Emily was the rot in the foundation. And Sophie believed with every fiber of her being that if Emily were removed from the equation, Michael would open his arms and welcome her home. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp, cool air. Emily had returned late the previous night and was enjoying a rare quiet morning on the patio, sipping herbal tea. Michael came out, his face etched with fatigue. He hadn't slept a wink. He sat down across from Emily, taking a breath to tell her everything that had happened the previous night. Before he could speak, Sophie emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray with fresh fruit and pastries. She wore a bright, pristine yellow dress, her braids pinned up neatly. She looked radiant, relaxed, and entirely undisturbed. "Good morning, Emily." "Good morning, Michael," Sophie said, placing the tray on the table with a pleasant smile. "I made some fresh melon and croissants." Emily smiled warmly up at her. "Sophie, you don't need to serve us. You should be taking it easy." "It's my pleasure," Sophie said softly. She glanced at Michael, giving him a polite, entirely professional nod. "I'll be in the garden if you need anything." Michael watched her walk away, his chest tight with disgust at her horrifying ability to mask her true nature. He waited until she was far down the lawn before he turned to Emily, taking her hands firmly in his. "Em, we have a massive problem," Michael said, his voice grim. Emily froze, sensing the gravity in his tone. "What is it? Is something wrong with the pregnancy?" "No," Michael said. "It's Sophie. Last night, while you were in San Diego, she came into my study. She tried to kiss me, Em. She confessed her love for me and said we were meant to be together." Emily sat completely motionless, the color draining from her face. "What?" she breathed, unable to process the words. "Sophie, but she's always been so sweet, so quiet." "It's an act," Michael said firmly. "She's deeply unstable." I shut it down instantly and told her in no uncertain terms that I love only you, and that she means nothing to me beyond the surrogacy contract. But her response, "Em, she's delusional. She thinks I'm lying to protect you. We need to get her off this property immediately." Emily gripped his hand tight, her mind racing with fear and shock. "Can we evict her? What about the baby? She's 7 months pregnant, Michael." "I don't care about the legal hassle," Michael said grimly. "She is a danger to our home." Unbeknownst to them, around the corner of the patio wall, Sophie stood in the shadows, listening to every word through the open French doors. A slow, bitter smile spread across her face. "You shouldn't have done that, Emily," Sophie whispered to herself softly, her fingernails digging into the wooden frame. "You're turning him against me." That evening, Emily went down to the basement utility room to retrieve extra bed linens. The basement was long, dimly lit, with a steep flight of hardwood stairs leading down from the main floor. As Emily stood near the bottom step holding a stack of folded blankets, she heard a faint sound above her. She turned around. Sophie was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at her. The ambient light from the hallway framed Sophie's silhouette, casting long, dark shadows down the stairwell. "Sophie," Emily called out, feeling an unusual chill creep down her neck. "Do you need something?" Sophie didn't answer right away. She took 2 steps down the wooden stairs, her eyes dark, fixed entirely on Emily. "You don't deserve him," Sophie said suddenly. Her voice was flat, devoid of its usual soft cadence. Emily felt her heart leap into her throat. "Sophie, what are you talking about?" "You couldn't give him a child," Sophie continued, taking another slow step down. "You're weak. Your body rejected his blood 7 times. I gave him life in weeks. He belongs with a real woman. He belongs with me." "Sophie, stay where you are," Emily said, her legal training kicking in as she forced her voice to remain steady despite the terror pounding in her chest. "You are suffering from a psychological delusion. Michael loves me. He told you the truth last night." "He was forced to say that," Sophie snapped, her voice suddenly spiking into a harsh scream that rattled the enclosed stairwell. "Because you hold the money, because you hold his life. If you were gone, he would finally be free to love us." Sophie suddenly lunged forward down the top steps, her hands outstretched as if to throw herself onto Emily and push her down the remaining flight of stairs. Emily gasped and leaped backward just in time. Sophie lost her footing on the slick wooden tread, stumbling heavily down 3 steps before catching herself against the handrail with a sharp groan, clutching her pregnant stomach. "Ah!" Sophie gasped, collapsing onto the middle landing. Michael, hearing the scream from the floor above, came sprinting into the hallway and tore down the stairs 4 at a time. "Emily!" he shouted, positioning himself instantly between his wife and Sophie. "I didn't touch her," Emily cried out, shaking violently. "Michael, she tried to push me. She tried to attack me." Michael looked down at Sophie, who was curled on the landing, sobbing hysterically now, completely shifting her tone. "He hurt me," Sophie wailed, holding her stomach. "The baby! I fell. Emily pushed me. She's jealous of me because I'm carrying your baby." Michael looked from Sophie's dramatic display to his wife's terrified eyes. He knew his wife. He knew the truth. "Get up, Sophie," Michael commanded, his voice cold as ice. "We're going to the hospital right now to check the baby. And after that, you are never stepping foot on this property again." While Sophie was admitted to the maternity ward at Cedars-Sinai for mandatory observation following her fall, Michael did not waste a single hour. He contacted Marcus Cole, a high-profile private investigator and former LAPD detective with whom his development firm had worked for years. By midnight, Marcus met Michael and Emily in the waiting room of the hospital. He carried a thick brown folder. "You were right to call me, Michael," Marcus said gravely, taking a seat across from the exhausted couple. Aegis Surrogacy dropped the ball completely on this one. They used an outsourced background firm that missed crucial records because she used a modified social security number and her middle name. Emily leaned forward, her face pale. "Who is she really, Marcus?" "Her full name is Sophie Vance Turner," Marcus revealed, opening the file. "She's not from Ohio, and she's not 24, she's 28. 4 years ago, living in Atlanta, she had a severe psychotic break following the loss of her own newborn child to a sudden medical condition. Emily gasped, clutching Michael's arm. Oh, God! It gets worse, Marcus continued, his eyes grim. She became obsessively attached to the attending pediatrician at the hospital in Atlanta. She stalked him for 6 months, convinced that he was her husband and the father of her deceased child. She broke into his home, attempted to attack his wife with a kitchen knife, and spent 18 months in a high-security state psychiatric facility in Georgia. Michael felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. How the hell did she get through the screening? Michael demanded, his voice trembling with controlled fury. She faked her identity documents, faked her employment records, and paid off a corrupt acquaintance to act as her reference, Marcus explained. She's a classic erotomaniac with deep maternal trauma. When she saw your profile, wealthy, handsome, desperate for a child, her mind constructed a complete fantasy world. She doesn't just want to carry your baby, Michael. She believes she is destined to replace Emily and take over your life. Emily buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. She's going to try to take our baby, Emily whispered in sheer horror. Michael, she's going to take her. She won't, Michael said, his jaw locked, his eyes burning with absolute determination. I will tear down heaven and earth before I let that woman hurt our family. The hospital kept Sophie under observation for 48 hours. The fall had caused no physical harm to the fetus or the placenta. The baby was entirely healthy, entering her 36th week. Michael and Emily acted with terrifying efficiency. Armed with Marcus's investigative report and an emergency court order signed by a superior judge, they severed Sophie's residency at their home, revoked her access to their property, and stationed private armed security guards outside the hospital room. Legal proceedings were initiated immediately to revoke her surrogate status under breach of contract and psychological endangerment, ensuring that upon delivery, the child would be placed instantly into Michael and Emily's custody with absolute legal protection. When Michael entered Sophie's hospital room on the third day, alongside 2 uniformed police officers and a legal clerk serving the restraining order, Sophie sat upright in bed. Her appearance had transformed. Her eyes were sunken, dark circles carved deep into her skin, her expression devoid of the gentle warmth she had feigned for months. You can't do this, Michael, she said softly, staring directly at him, completely ignoring the officers and lawyers. You can't break what God joined together. She's my daughter. She carries my warmth. She carries my DNA and Emily's DNA, Michael said, standing at the foot of her bed, his voice flat and unyielding. You are legally barred from coming within 500 yards of Emily or me. When you give birth, you will not hold her. You will not see her. You will be transferred directly to a state psychiatric facility for evaluation. Sophie stared at him. Then, slowly, a low, chilling laughter bubbled up from her throat. You think walls can stop me? She whispered, leaning forward, her eyes locking onto his with terrifying intensity. You think paper can stop a mother? She belongs to us, Michael, and I will bring her home. Take care of yourself, Sophie, Michael said quietly, turning his back on her and walking out of the room. 2 weeks later, the final blow descended. It was 3 o'clock in the morning on a stormy Thursday. Sophie went into sudden, rapid labor at the hospital's high-risk maternity ward. Because of the court order, the hospital staff immediately notified Michael and Emily, who rushed to Cedars-Sinai through blinding rain. When they arrived at the maternity floor, the scene was chaotic. Sophie had spent 4 hours in excruciating labor. Throughout the entire process, she had refused pain medication, screaming Michael's name endlessly until her voice was hoarse. At 4:12 a.m., a healthy 6-pound baby girl was delivered. Per the strict emergency court mandate, the medical staff immediately moved the newborn baby to a secure private isolation nursery on the fourth floor, barring Sophie from touching or seeing the child. Emily and Michael were escorted to the adjacent recovery nursery to bond with their daughter for the very first time. Emily stood over the small plastic crib, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the tiny, perfect infant wrapped in a pink blanket. The baby had a tuft of dark hair and delicate, soft fingers. "She's here," Emily sobbed, holding the baby against her chest, feeling the tiny heart beating against her own. "Michael, look at her. She's here. She's beautiful," Michael whispered, tears brimming in his eyes as he stroked the baby's forehead. "Maya, our little Maya." While Michael and Emily were lost in the profound joy of holding their child, horror was unfolding 2 halls away. Sophie, driven by a violent, psychotic rush of adrenaline following childbirth, pushed past the fatigue of delivery. Exploiting a shift change among the hospital security guards and the noise of an emergency trauma intake on the floor below, she slid out of her bed, wearing her blood-stained medical gown and a dark coat she had stolen from a staff breakroom closet. Sophie slipped out into the corridor. She moved like a shadow, fueled by a single burning delusion: save the baby. Escape with Michael's child. She reached the fourth-floor nursery corridor. Finding the emergency access door unlocked by a janitor carrying laundry linens, she slipped inside. She located the infant bassinet labeled Harrison, baby girl. The room was temporarily empty as the primary nurse was filling out vital sign charts at the central station 20 feet away. Sophie snatched tiny Maya from her crib, wrapping her tightly inside her dark coat against her chest, and vanished into the emergency stairwell before the alarm was ever tripped. 5 minutes later, the nursery alarm blared throughout the hospital. Michael was standing in the corridor outside Emily's private room when the red lights began flashing and security guards broke into a sprint down the hall. "Code pink, floor 4, code pink," the intercom blared. Michael's heart turned to liquid ice. He ran frantically toward the nursery. He found the door open, the bassinet empty, and the night nurse frantic with panic. "Where is my baby?" Michael roared, grabbing the security supervisor by the tactical vest. "Where is my daughter?" "Sir, the emergency stairs fire door was breached 10 seconds ago," the guard yelled into his radio. "She took the infant toward the parking garage." Michael didn't wait. He bolted down the concrete stairs, taking 6 steps at a time, his heart hammering in his chest like a war drum. Outside, the storm was at its violent peak. Sheets of water slammed against the asphalt of the hospital parking lot. Michael burst through the heavy metal exit doors of the garage just in time to see a silver sedan, stolen from an idling valet ramp down the block, peel out onto San Vicente Boulevard, its tires screeching against the wet pavement. Through the rain-streaked rear window of the getaway car, Michael caught a fleeting, haunting glimpse of Sophie in the driver's seat, holding the tiny bundle tightly against her chest, with one arm while steering with the other. "No!" Michael screamed into the storm. He threw himself into his own heavy SUV parked in the executive slot, slammed the engine into gear, and roared out of the lot after her. He dialed 911 on his hands-free dashboard speaker, his voice trembling with terrifying intensity. "This is Michael Harrison. My newborn daughter was just kidnapped from Cedars-Sinai Hospital by Sophie Vance. I am pursuing her vehicle heading north on Wilshire Boulevard. Send everyone you have." The chase swept through the slick, empty streets of West Los Angeles. Sophie drove like a madwoman, running red lights, sliding across double yellow lines, completely lost in her psychotic brake. Inside her vehicle, she was singing a distorted, gentle lullaby to the crying baby beside her in the passenger seat. "Don't cry, little baby," Sophie sang wildly, her eyes wide, staring at the rain-blinded road. "Daddy is behind us. He's coming with us. We're going to be a family now." Behind her, Michael's heavy SUV maintained distance, his headlights cutting through the blinding downpour. Sirens wailed in the distance as three LAPD cruiser headlights appeared in his rearview mirror, joining the pursuit. "Sophie, pull over!" Michael shouted through his open window as he pulled parallel to her at an intersection, trying to force her toward the empty curb away from oncoming traffic. "Stop the car! Think about the baby! You're going to hurt her." Sophie looked across at Michael through her rain-slicked side window. A terrifying, beautiful smile illuminated her face. "I love you, Michael," she screamed through the glass. "We're going home." Ahead lay the winding, dangerous curves of Sunset Boulevard as it swept through the canyon. Sophie swerved violently to cut Michael off, accelerating into a sharp, unlit turn at 60 miles per hour. The tires of her sedan lost traction entirely on a deep pool of standing water. The vehicle spun out of control, sliding sideways across 3 lanes, hitting the concrete guardrail of the canyon bridge with a deafening metallic crunch. The car flipped once over the low stone wall and plunged 20 feet down into the muddy wooded ravine below, crashing upside down against a thick oak tree. "No!" Michael screamed, slamming his SUV into the shoulder wall and throwing his door open before his vehicle had even fully stopped. He tore down the slippery, muddy embankment in the torrential rain, sliding on his knees through brush and rocks until he reached the crushed metal shell of the inverted sedan. Smoke poured from the crumpled hood. The driver's side was smashed completely flat. Michael threw himself onto the mud, pulling open the buckled rear door with brute, desperate force born of pure adrenaline. "Maya!" he screamed, pulling himself halfway into the wreckage. In the center of the crushed cabin, protected by the reinforced frame of the floorboards and the deployed side curtain airbags, the tiny bundle was wedged safely between the soft rear seat cushions. The baby was crying, a loud, piercing, furious wail. Michael reached in with trembling, bleeding hands, gently pulling his newborn daughter into his arms, checking her tiny head, her arms, her legs. She was uninjured, shielded miraculously by the structure of the rear compartment. He pulled her close to his chest, wrapping his heavy leather jacket around her to protect her from the freezing rain, weeping tears of pure relief. He looked toward the crushed driver's side. Sophie was pinned beneath the collapsed roof frame. Her eyes were open, staring blankly up through the shattered windshield into the dark, rainy night sky. Her chest was still. The manic fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet, tragic silence. Police officers and paramedics scrambled down the embankment with bright flashlights, their boots splashing through the thick mud. "Sir, hand us the baby!" An emergency medic shouted, reaching out. "Sir, we've got her!" Michael held his daughter tight for one last second, kissing her soft forehead through the cold rain, before handing her safely into the paramedics' waiting arms. 4 weeks later, the morning sun returned to the house on the Pacific Palisades, painting the hardwood floors with soft, golden light. The quiet that had once haunted the spacious halls was gone, replaced by the gentle, sweet sounds of a home filled with life. In the sunlit nursery, decorated with hand-painted murals of clouds and quiet mountains, Emily sat in a plush rocking chair. She was holding baby Maya, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms, wearing a soft white onesie. Michael walked in quietly, holding 2 cups of warm tea. He wore a simple linen shirt and relaxed trousers, the shadows and tension of the past months finally erased from his face. He handed a cup to Emily, then leaned down to gently kiss the top of his wife's head before running a warm thumb across his daughter's cheek. "How is she doing?" Michael asked softly. "She just finished her bottle." Emily smiled, looking up at her husband with deep, unwavering affection. "She's perfect, Michael. Absolutely perfect." Michael looked out the tall glass windows toward the vast blue horizon of the Pacific Ocean. The storm had passed. The terror, the obsession, and the dark shadows that had threatened to tear their dream apart were buried in the past. He sat on the wide armrest of the rocking chair, wrapping his arm around Emily's shoulders, pulling his wife and daughter close to his heart. "We made it," Emily whispered, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady, strong rhythm of his heartbeat. "We made it," Michael echoed, his voice filled with a quiet, eternal promise. Welcome home, Maya. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. We would love to know what you think.